Hey guys, welcome back to Luxury Galore. Today we'll talk about why the AMD Ryzen 5000 series will beat the new Intel CPUs. Let's head into it. Number 1. CCX and CCD changes. In gaming performance, one area that AMD has lagged behind Intel over the lifetime of the Zen brand is it's no secret that the design decisions resulted in more latency between core complexes in the company's push to lower the cost per core of its flagship processors through the introduction of the chiplet-based architectures. In certain PC gaming scenarios, that manifests itself in reduced performance, especially at that favored 1080p resolution used by most gamers. This is down to how chips are designed and how they are laid out on each die. More specifically, each processor contains a series of 4 core CCXs, short for core complexes, and the chipset approach that make up the bigger CCD or core chiplet die. The added latency that comes from increased communication distances between each CCD prevents single core, lightly threaded performance from reaching its peak potential when a CCD consists of multiple CCXs, as was the case for all CPUs in the original Zen 2 stack. AMD has redesigned the chips from the ground up with Zen 3, piggybacking off the advances made in the latest iteration of XT processors launched back in July by the company. By rethinking the layout of its CCD and CCX designs, the company could get much closer to the kind of single-threaded and gaming performance boosts we saw in editor's choice picks, such as the AMD Ryzen 3 3300X and its top-tier chips. The 3300X is a chip that continues to reign at the best value choice for desktop PC gamers to this day, as opposed to anything Intel has on offer at a comparable price point. Number 2. A venerable platform keeps paying off. In its platform and required socket adoption for new PCs, PC builds, and upgrades, or rather, its required adoption, another way that AMD seems poised to continue its winning streak over Intel is, instead of forcing customers onto a new motherboard platform with a new CPU socket style for every other generation of chips, the typical cadence for Intel desktop processors in recent years, Zen 3 marks the third launch in the Zen line to feature some level of motherboard compatibility based on the now venerable socket AM4. A single caveat, unlike Zen 2, which is compatible with a motherboard based on just about AM4, this time the cutoff for Zen 3 is a bit higher up the chipset stack. The new CPUs will only work with the X470, B450, and later generations of chipset motherboards. That includes the new X570 and B550 boards. Plus, to make it work, it's up to the motherboard manufacturers to issue the correct updates. The company explained Zen 3 AM4 compatibility back in May, claiming that any user of either X470 or B450 motherboards would need a BIOS update. We have confirmation of that now, but it's not the news that might have been hoped for by some prospective buyers. For 400 series motherboards, the earliest BIOS updates will not hit the net until January 2021, at the earliest, and even then, they will be in beta form, not a full release. In AMD's otherwise near impenetrable armor, this seems to develop into a small crack, but one that should seal up quickly enough as the dust from the Zen 3 launch settles, and is still a better prospect than what's happening on the Intel side. In any case, there is no backward compatibility for older motherboards with its new 10th generation Comet Lake desktop chips, such as the Core i5 10600K, a new board based on the Z490 chipset and equipped with an LGA 1200 socket is required, a complete stop. Ultimately, either way, AMD's obstacles here will not be a big enough deal for Intel to capitalize on by the time motherboard manufacturers are pushing out the door for the first BIOS builds. Intel probably won't even have its next gen 11th generation Rocket Lake CPUs out yet. Number 3. Intel's on 14nm. Having just come off a set of wins in a narrow testing niche, specifically at certain resolutions, with the launch of its latest 10th generation series of Comet Lake CPUs that hit shelves in May of this year, Intel has been holding its own to some extent. In some areas, it still has a decisive advantage. The company's chips look to be, at least until today, the undisputed champions for both 1080p gaming and lightly threaded and a single core performance at their respective price levels. And that will remain true until we get a chance to benchmark AMD's first new Zen 3 CPUs for ourselves. But Intel's chances of keeping that lead past November 5, 2020 aren't looking all that good. That's because of its recent announcement that its upcoming 14nm desktop CPU 11th generation Rocket Lake line will not be launched until sometime in the first quarter of 2021, while after the holiday season has already passed. Compared to Zen 3, that's late, but just as crucial. Will the sophisticated 14nm+++ process of Intel be able to continue leapfrogging AMD once Zen 3 is launched? Time will tell that story with more clarity, along with our benchmarking suite. But don't expect a massive reversal of fortune from a distance, and on the basis of what we know from specs and AMD's claims today, desktop CPU prospects for the next year do not look promising for Intel, and Rocket Lake will probably not end up being the consumer desktop savior of the company, except for some unforeseen, undivulged fuel source. Around Rocket Lake 2020, the largest selling point disclosed so far, PCI Express 4.0 buses and speeds will finally be supported by Intel supporting chipset platform for use with the speedy SSDs such as the Samsung SSD 980 Pro, and to extend bandwidth for expansion cards. That's great, But the issue is, since the summer of 2019, Ryzen has had PCI Express 4.0 support on chipsets, starting with the X570. Ouch. These three reasons should make it obvious why the AMD Ryzen 5000 series will dominate the desktop and beat the new Intel CPUs. What do you think about the AMD Ryzen 5000 series? Do you also think that they will beat the new Intel CPUs? Let us know in the comment section. This brings us to the end of our video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any of our videos in the future. Also, watch the two videos that are on your screen because I'm sure you'll love them. With that, I'll see you in the next video.